We are now at the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and get this party started. Just wanted to take a quick minute to thank everyone for joining us today. It's busy for everybody. Doesn't matter whether you're working or not, whether you're at home or at the office. It's not easy to find a 60-minute window to join us for an online workshop about Social Security. For most people, that's not their favorite subject that they want to learn about in the middle of a week. So I just wanted to take a minute and thank everyone for sharing some of your time with us today. I'm going to do my best to make sure it's worthwhile and valuable to you. A couple housekeeping items before we get started here. Number one, very easy to multitask when we have these online workshops. In front of me at my desktop here at the office, I have two screens. It's helpful for doing presentations like this because I can kind of see the slides coming down and refresh my memory on what to say next. But it's also very easy if you're attending one of these things to have email, social media, or other work going simultaneously. So please do what you need to do to focus your attention in here for the next hour. Shut the door to your office, put the phone on silent, whatever that means to you. I will ask for your attention. Number three, none of what we cover today is personalized advice. And this is all educational content you're free to use on your own. It will not be personalized advice unless we have some kind of advisory or financial planning agreement in place. So just wanted to make that clear. You would know if that were the case. If you have questions about any of this, feel free to reach out or go talk to your tax person, your attorneys, your financial planner, whoever your person is to run some of these ideas across. And number four, you'll notice in the Zoom navigation, we've been in this pandemic environment for quite a while now, and I would guess that, that pretty much everybody on the call is familiar with how to use Zoom. If you're not, you'll notice that in the navigation, there's a Q&A box, and there's also a chat box. And for me, they both show up on the navigation bar, but in the past, for me, the chat box has shown up in the More section, which is on the right-hand side of your navigation. So if you click if you don't see the chat box, click the three dots on the right, and there'll be this drop-down menu. You can find it there. So the idea here is as we go along, if you have questions, feel free to dump them in either location. I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. If I don't get to them, because I do want to, out of respect for everybody's time, keep us as best I can within the 60 minutes we've scheduled, I'll try to answer questions as they come in. If I don't get to them out of the sake of time, I'll circle back at the end during our open Q&A. And I'll stick around for a few minutes depending on how many questions come in to respond to those. So let's jump into this a little bit. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me or the firm or what we do here, you can imagine I'm the gentleman with the beard. You can probably see me on video and match it up with the picture here. That's my lovely wife and our three little kids. So our lives are pretty busy right now. I'm a financial planner. And what that means is I and my team help people do the best they can with what they have. We help them reach financial independence, squeeze the most juice out of the fruit, so to speak, from their resources, grow wealth, pay less in taxes, structure their finances in a way that is aligned with their families, their values, their intentions, their objectives. And the idea is if we can move the pieces of the puzzle around successfully, which we're almost always able to do, people will come out a lot better and live much, much better lives long term. The fee-only portion of that means that we're only compensated by our clients directly. And this is increasingly important in today's day and age. There are a lot of financial professionals across the country, more or less maybe 300,000 these days. The vast majority of that group is influenced either by the firm they work for. They're compelled to extract a certain amount of revenue from each of their clients every year, which is not ideal, and or they're influenced by commissions for selling specific products. So if you're going to a financial professional for help with your stuff, making financial decisions, managing money, minimizing tax, all the stuff financial planners typically help people with, if that professional is going to make a few $100s for recommending strategy 1, or a few $1,000s for recommending strategy 2, it's very challenging for human beings to act purely objectively and in the best interests of their client without regard for their own compensation. And so the fee only portion of this means that we've just taken that conflict out. And we don't sell products, we recommend products, but the idea is we want to be as objective as we can be in this pursuit of getting people to the best place financially for them. So my take on this is it's becoming increasingly important these days. It's a growing trend. I think more and more financial planners are moving in that direction, but it's still the small minority of that group of more or less 300,000. I've got a couple of professional credentials. I'm a certified financial planner, which you may have heard of. It's the predominant designation in the industry these days. I'm also a chartered financial analyst, which is portfolio and investment management focused. It's one that I'm particularly proud of because it's exceptionally challenging to obtain. That's the one that you want to get if you're trying to manage a hedge fund or a mutual fund or a pension fund or some institutional pool of money. I got it in a prior life when I was working on a trading desk. So my background is I started at Charles Schwab after business school in 2007. I was on their securities lending trading desk, worked in both the retail and institutional capacity, and I was there for 7 years. I had a really nice upward career trajectory. I worked with a wonderful group of people. It was a tremendous place to learn and cut my teeth. But I got to the point where I didn't want to do the same thing every day. I wanted to help people more directly, and I felt like if you're looking for help with your stuff, you probably want someone who's competent, educated, experienced, objective, has a fiduciary responsibility to act in your best interests, and the vast majority of the industry still doesn't operate in that capacity. So I resigned, and in 2014, I started this firm, Three Oaks Wealth. It's grown tremendously. Our team is growing here pretty rapidly. And like I said, we provide fee-only financial planning. I've got a blog that I write on. It's called Above the Canopy. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. If you'd like to hear me talk more or read more of my my stuff, I have a podcast called Grow Money Business. That's the one where I talk. The blog is where I write. And yeah, that's some background about me, about the firm, about what we do. I don't want to dwell on this too much because I know that's not what everybody tuned in for today. So let's dive into what we're going to be covering in the call today. And Bridget dropped a question into the chat about fee model. Bridget, I'm going to table that and we'll circle back to that at the end of the call if that's okay. We do have a lot of technical stuff to cover about Social Security, so we'll circle back to that one. Now, what we are going to be covering today is an in-depth background about Social Security and what the benefit calculation actually looks like. This is something that a lot of people have questions about. It's somewhat complicated and a little bit confusing. And if you know how the calculation and that background works, it's a heck of a lot easier to maximize your own benefit. So we'll cover that. We'll cover how and why it's important to incorporate spousal filing decisions into your decisions. You should look at this as a couple, not as an individual. A few of my favorite filing strategies for maximizing benefits, and some of the big mistakes I see in my financial planning practice when it comes to filing for Social Security. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'm going to move somewhat rapidly today because I want to add a few minutes talking about the status of the Social Security Trust Fund. This is something that everybody has questions about. Will Social Security actually be around for me? I hear we're running out of money. We now have, COVID, where less money has been contributed to the fund. Baby boomers are retiring. There's going to be more liabilities going out of the fund than payroll taxes going into the fund. How does all that work? Will they be around for me? So I want to talk about that for a minute or two here at the end today. So a little bit of background about Social Security as a program. This gentleman you might recognize is FDR, stern-looking photo, but I guess if you're putting pictures and paintings up in the White House, you have to present authority, and he was good at that. This is the genesis. FDR was the genesis of Social Security, and you might remember the New Deal legislation in the 30s. This is before World War II, after the Depression. Basically, government fiscal stimulus helped drive our way out of the Depression. And I'm not a financial historian. There are a lot more factors than that. But as part of that New Deal package of legislation, all these pieces of fiscal stimulus, the Social Security Act of 1935 was a piece of it. So in the Social Security Act of 1935, there were a bunch of stuff that we enjoy today that were added at that time. Old age survivors and disability insurance, that's the retirement benefits we're going to be talking about today. Temporary assistance for needy families, this is when Medicare was created, Medicaid, state children's health insurance, and supplemental security income. It was a pretty broad piece of legislation, and again, packaged together with a bunch of other stuff as part of FDR's New Deal efforts. Now, the retirement benefits is the largest component of OASDI, Old Age Survivors Disability Income, insurance. And so of all the stuff that got passed as part of the Social Security Act of 35, OASDI was the largest component, bigger than Medicare, because your life expectancy at that time was quite a bit shorter than it is today. So OASDI, these are the retirement benefits that we enjoy after you file for Social Security in your 60s or when you're 70. And basically the idea is the IRS and the Social Security Administration keep track of your earnings every year. You put some of your earnings each year when you work in jobs eligible for Social Security. You pay this payroll tax, 6.2%, into the system. That 6.2% of your earnings is your contribution to the Social Security Trust. Then, after you stop working, you file for benefits, you start collecting checks each month for the rest of your life from the Social Security Trust Fund. So while you're working, you're contributing to the fund. Money goes into this trust. It's maintained by the U.S. Treasury. And any year where there's more money going into the trust through these payroll taxes than is coming out in terms of expenses, i.e. benefit checks going out to those in retirement claiming benefits, that excess is invested in U.S. government bonds. And by rule, U.S. government bonds is the only thing that the U.S. Social Security Trust Fund may invest in. So, by extension, this arrangement indirectly finances our federal government spending because we tax payrolls, money goes in, money comes out to pay benefits, and anytime there's a surplus or money in the cash register, that goes into U.S. government bonds. So basically, the Social Security Trust is lending money to the federal government for their operations, which is an interesting dynamic. Now, the tax on contributions, like I said, is 6.2%. And what that means is that if you're working a W-2 job that's eligible for Social Security, if you're making $100,000 a year, 6.2% of that, or $6,200, is going to come out of your paycheck throughout the year and go into the Social Security trust. Your employer pays payroll taxes that is also 6.2%. So your employer pays half of the tax, you pay half of the tax. Now, if you're self-employed, if you are a business owner, if you are a 1099 independent contractor, that means that you're not collecting a W-2 wage and you're technically self-employed. So guess what? When you're self-employed, you're both the employee and the employer. You have the luxury of paying both sides of the Social Security payroll tax. And so the self-employment tax is 15.3%. Now notice on my slide here, it says 12.4%. That's because we haven't added Medicare yet. But when you're self-employed, you get to pay both sides of this. So it's 12.4% for Medicare, and we'll get to, or excuse me, for Social Security, we'll get to Medicare in just a moment. Now, if you're a high income person, let's say you make $200,000, Social Security has a wage base, meaning that only the wage base is taxed for Social Security purposes. And in this year, in 2021, that wage base is $142,800. If you make $200,000, that other $57,200, I'm doing my math right, is not subject to the 6.2% tax. Only your income up to the wage base. That wage base goes up a little bit every year with inflation. Last year it was 137.7. So I mentioned Medicare. You pay 6.2% as an employee for Social Security. For Medicare, you pay 1.45%. So the total here, you'll notice that on your pay stub, it'll say oftentimes OASDI tax withholdings instead of breaking it down into Social Security and Medicare. The total there is 7.65% as the employee, 7.65% as the employer. And again, just like Social Security, if you're self-employed, you get to pay both sides of this, 2.9% for Medicare. There is no wage base for Medicare. So if you're making $200,000 a year or anything above the wage base, you're only paying the first 6.2% for Social Security up to the wage base. You're not paying 6.2% above that. For Medicare, there is no limit. So if you're making $200,000 a year, you're paying 1.45% for Medicare on everything. That's a little bit different. And there's even a high income Medicare surtax at higher levels of income. So let's go through a couple examples here. Let's say that you're a W-2 employee and your income is less than the wage base. Let's say that you make $72,500 this year. Your OASDI taxable wages is $72,500 because you're under the wage base. Your Medicare taxable wage is also $72,500. So the amount of tax you're going to pay as an employee, 6.2% for Social Security, 1.45% for Medicare, your employer is going to pay the exact same amount. But what happens when your income is above the wage base? It looks like the title of the slide I need to reverse. But here, your gross pay is $167.5, which is above the wage base, which means that your Social Security wage base, or your Social Security taxes, are limited to $142.8. That's the wage base. The Medicare taxable wages, again, there is no limit. So you're paying 6.2% on the first $142.8, or $8,854, and you're paying 1.45% on the whole thing, all of your wages, which comes out to $24.29. Your employer has the exact same liability. You pay half, your employer pays half. Now, when it comes to collecting benefits, well, let's take a quick step back. So while you're working, if you're working in a job that's eligible for Social Security, which typically means you're not eligible for any kind of government pension. If you are, there's usually an offset there, or you're not contributing to Social Security at all. When you are in a job that's contributing, you're making these contributions to the fund each year through the payroll tax. And so you work throughout your career, and then when it comes time to start collecting, the benefit that you get is based on the amount you put into the trust over your career. And you're considered, quote unquote, fully insured if you've paid those OASDI taxes for 40 quarters. So 10 years worth of earnings will enable you to collect some kind of Social Security benefit. If you only worked for 10 years, then that benefit's not going to be very large, but that it does mean you're entitled to something. The way that it works is the benefit's based on your highest 35 years of inflation-adjusted earnings. And the terminology here is average indexed monthly earnings. So when it comes time to file for benefits, you have a primary insurance amount, which is the size of the monthly check Social Security Administration is going to pay you every month for the rest of your life if you file at your full retirement age. And full retirement age right now is 66 and like 9 months or something like that. So if you're in that boat where you were born or where you're thinking about filing at full retirement age, if you do so, the amount you're going to get is your primary insurance amount. And the primary insurance amount, again, is based on your highest 35 years of inflation-adjusted earnings. So how do we get to what that primary insurance amount is? What happens? What is the calculation that the Social Security Administration uses with our inflation-adjusted earnings? Well, what they do is they take a look at every year's worth of history. So every year that you put money into the system, they adjust that for inflation, and then they take the highest 35 years, and then they average them. So if you have 40 years of work history, the 5 years where your earnings were the lowest aren't even considered in the calculation. If you have 25 years of work history, it's not the average of your 25 years of work history. You get 10 years of zeros. So you take the average inflation-adjusted amount of the 25 years you have, and then they add 10 years of zeros. So when I said you have to work, contribute to the system for 10 years or 40 quarters, and if you have only 10 years, your benefit is not going to be great. This is what I'm getting at. If you have 25 years of zeros, that's going to drag down the average substantially. And we'll go through some examples here in a minute, because I know this is a little bit abstract. So the Social Security Administration keeps track of your contributions to the fund through payroll taxes. And every year they produce this Social Security statement that lists out your history. And it looks exactly like this. This is just a random statement I pulled off the internet. You can access this by going online, ssa.gov. You can log in, pull this statement, and that's a good idea to do every year, by the way, because the Social Security Administration does sometimes make mistakes with your earnings. So it's helpful to review this and make sure they didn't do that. But this is what the statement looks like. You have your earnings record and how much you contributed to the system, your taxed Social Security earnings, your taxed Medicare earnings, and then it spits out your primary insurance amount in a secondary page of what you're entitled to every month if you file at your full retirement age. So the primary insurance amount, remember how we got here. We took the earnings history, we adjusted each year for inflation, and then we took the highest 35 years of adjusted earnings and averaged them. From there, we apply this calculation here to arrive at primary insurance amount. So remember that Social Security is meant to be a progressive system where lower income earners are going to have more of their working income replaced by Social Security than higher income earners. These are called bend points. So if your average inflation adjusted monthly earnings, AIME, are only $500 per month, then you're going to have 90% of them replaced. So that's a pretty large portion of your working income Social Security is going to cover. But if you're a higher income earner above $6,002, a smaller portion of your earnings will be replaced by Social Security. These are the three bend points we're talking about. So it's a progressive system. In my opinion, by and large, that's a good thing. Let's go through a couple examples because I know that's challenging to digest just talking about it. So let's say that your average salary adjusted for inflation during your career is $50,000. And so theoretically, you'd put 50,000 times 6.2% into the Social Security trust every year throughout your career. If I take 50,000 and I divide it by 12, that gives an average indexed monthly earnings of $4,167. And so remember how the calculation works. On the first $996 of inflation adjusted monthly earnings, we get 90% contributing toward the primary insurance amount. So if I take 996, I multiply it by 90%, I get 896.40. Then we get 32% of the next $5,006, which works out to $1,014.72. We don't have enough income because remember, the average inflation monthly earnings, inflation adjusted earnings here is 4167. So we don't have enough earnings to reach the third bend point. But if we add these two figures together, we get a total primary insurance amount of $1,911.12. Again, that's the amount that we are entitled to every month for the rest of our lives if we file at full retirement age. So let's look at another example. What if your average salary is $75,000? You take that into 12 monthly installments, we get $6,250. The first bend point is going to be the same because you'll get 90% of the first 996. You'll get 32% of the next $5,006. But then we have a little bit of monthly earnings that spill into the third bend point. We're only getting 15% of that bend point replaced by primary insurance amount. So when we do the math and we add all this up, we get a little more than $2,500 a month. Now, the maximum primary insurance amount is whatever the wage base is, because it doesn't matter how much you make if you're above the wage base. Only the first 142.8 is going to be taxed for Social Security purposes. So therefore, the maximum amount of primary insurance that you can get is that wage base for this year. So we do the math on that, it's $11,900 per month. The first and second bend points are identical. We take whatever's left, multiply it by 15%, and add them together. So this year, the maximum primary insurance amount anybody in the system at all is entitled to is $3,383.02. Now, keep in mind, this is not the maximum monthly check possible because we have the decision of when we file for benefits next. But this primary insurance amount is the first step in that chain. So I mentioned that full retirement age depends on when you were born. And right now, I can't remember if it's 66 and 6 months or 66 and 8 months, but somewhere in this age range toward the bottom of our chart is likely where people are falling if they're thinking about filing for Social Security anytime soon. If you were born after 1959, your full retirement age is 67. This chart here of full retirement ages has not changed in a very long time. I think they tweaked it in a small way back in the 80s, but that was 40 years ago. So one of the criticisms of Social Security, which I think is valid, we're having issues taking more out of the trust than we're putting in. We will expend the money in the trust here at some point about 12 years down the road. What do we need to do about it? Well, in my personal opinion, I think we need to raise the retirement age as a starting point, because we're living a lot longer than we were 40 years ago, the last time it was adjusted, and we're living a heck of a lot longer than we were in 1935 when the program was created. So we've talked about inflation-adjusted earnings, primary insurance amount. That's the check that you get if you file on at your full retirement age. The amount of check that the size of the check that you'll end up receiving, well, let me back up. The check that you can receive is going to be influenced by when you file. So if you file before your full retirement age, and you can file as early as 62, you take your primary insurance amount and reduce it by a calculation we'll go over here shortly. You can also delay all the way until age 70. And for every year that you delay, you earn these delayed retirement credits, which adds to the monthly check that you'll wind up getting. So again, primary insurance amount is your monthly benefit at full retirement age. You file before full retirement age, that check is reduced. You file after full retirement age, that check is increased. So you can file as early as 62. And if you file anytime before your full retirement age, for every month before full retirement age that you file, your check will be your primary insurance amount reduced by 0.5% for each month you file in the first 36 before full retirement age. Doing the math on this, if your full retirement age is 67 and you file 36 months before your full retirement age, that's age 64. You can file as early as age 62. And for those additional 2 years after the first 36 months, your benefit is reduced 0.5%. So the haircut is a little bit lower in those first 2 years. Generally, it doesn't make sense to do this. For most people, circumstances depending, when you file for benefits, it's a permanent decision. There's one way you can reverse it. We'll cover it later. But for the most part, remember that a lot of people just want to get to 62 and file for Social Security and just be done with it. That's often not a very sound decision, because you're permanently reducing the amount of benefits you'll get for the rest of your life. And so many people in our society these days live well into their 80s and into their 90s. The math really works out in your favor to wait until at least full retirement age. So this is the way that the math works. Remember, 0.5% for every month before full retirement age for the first 36, and 0.5% for every month thereafter. So if your full retirement age is 67, I'm looking at the right-hand column, and you file at 67, so the bottom right-hand cell here, or box, you get 100% of your full retirement age. Primary insurance amount, excuse me. For every year before that, 0.5% multiplied by 12, and you see the haircut going down as we go up the chart. If you file as early as you can at age 62, you're only entitled to 70% of your primary insurance amount. So let's do the math here. If your full retirement age is 65, which is probably not anybody on this call, but I mean, theoretically it's possible. If your full retirement age is 65, by the way, and you have not filed for benefits, close your computer and go to the Social Security office right now, or call them and claim your benefits, because you're leaving money on the table. But that aside, if you file at 62, which is the maximum amount it can be reduced, there are 36 months between age 62 and 65. So you take 5/9 of 1%, multiplied by 36, it's a 20% haircut, because there are no additional months after the first 3 years. And you'll be entitled to 80% of your benefit, your primary insurance amount. 66, you've got 48 months between 62 and 66. Again, 20% haircut on the first 3 years, but then a 5/12% haircut on the final year, which means your minimum benefit is 75%. And again, minimum benefit if your full retirement age is 67 goes down to 70% of your primary insurance amount. And again, once you file, yes, you start collecting checks early, but they're 70% of what they would be had you waited. And the way the math works, if you're living into your 80s, even though you collect checks early, the amount of that reduction catches up with you quickly. If you're not in good health or think it's very unlikely you're going to live past your early 70s, then yes, by all means, we want to file as early as possible to collect as many checks as we can. Now, filing after full retirement age is a similar deal. You can delay all the way up until age 70. For every month after your full retirement age, you accumulate what are called delayed retirement credits, the amount of which varies by your birth year. So again, if your full retirement age was 65, if you were born in the 30s, you're entitled to Social Security, but you're not claiming it yet, please go out this moment and start claiming your benefits. But for most of us on this call, I would say, you're probably going to be in this bottom box here. You're born in 43 or later, and for every month after full retirement age you file, your benefit goes up by 0.2%, or 8% per year. So this is what it looks like. If your full retirement age is 66 and you file at 66, guess what? You're getting your primary insurance amount. If you file at 67, it goes up by 8% for every year that you delay. So if your full retirement age is 66 and you delay till 70, you have 4 years of those delayed retirement credits accumulating. You get 32%, a 32% increase in your check from the initial primary insurance amount. If your full retirement age is 67, since you can only delay until 70, there's only 3 years available to build these delayed retirement credits. And if you do, you're bumping your primary insurance amount up by 24% because you don't have as much time to build them. Again, all this stuff is subject to change. I would be somewhat surprised if the system did not change in the next 5 years. I sincerely hope it does, because if not, we will eventually run it into the ground. But as things stand, this is the way the system works. So putting an example to all these ideas, if you're born in 1960, your full retirement age is 67, that means you have 36 months to accumulate delayed retirement credits. 0.2% per month increase. We do the math on that with a $2,000 primary insurance amount. 36 times 0.2% times $2,000 means that instead of collecting $2,000 a month by filing at full retirement age, you're going to collect the sum of those two, or $2,480, by waiting 3 years. Every $2,480 every month for the rest of your life by waiting for 3 years, and potentially the rest of you and your spouse's lives if you're married. So the question of when you file comes down to a couple different factors. And I'll go through a couple examples that should be somewhat self-explanatory. Let's say that you're 62, you're in great health, your parents and other family members have lived a long time, and you think that there's a strong chance you're going to live well into your 80s. If that's you, it probably makes a lot of sense to delay as long as you can, earn the delayed retirement credits, file at age 70, if that's congruent with the rest of your financial and retirement plan. There are other factors we need to consider, but if we're maximizing the mathematical value of your benefits, and this is the fact pattern, the way to maximize them in this scenario is to delay until age 70. On the other hand, if you're 62, your health has not been great, you don't have longevity in your family, and you don't think that there's a great chance you're going to live through your 70s, then even though you will wind up collecting smaller checks by filing early, if you're not going to make it through your 70s, it makes sense to collect as many of those now as we can, because the increase in check that you get by earning the delayed retirement credits is not going to have enough time or enough of those monthly checks to make up what you're missing out on now. So that's not the only thing that we need to consider. This is, like all things financial, circumstances depending. Maximizing the mathematical value of your benefits is one thing, but we also need to incorporate everything else that's going on in your life and your finances. Health status, other income needs you might have. If you really need the income and you've just departed from your job permanently, then maybe waiting around for those delayed retirement credits is not worth it. You know, a lot of people want to work part-time in retirement, and if that is not the case, or let's say that is the case, and you're going to work part-time and you're thinking about filing before full retirement age, well, that's something we need to consider, because the part-time work might supplement the income, and if you make more than a little bit of money after filing for benefits before your full retirement age, Social Security actually reduces the amount of your check further and holds it for you until you hit full retirement age, and then they give it to you back. Survivor needs, other stuff going on in your family, life expectancy. Again, like all things financial, decisions with Social Security need to be made within the context of everything that's going on with you and your family and your finances. One helpful data point is the math. And oftentimes it does come down to the core math of what decision is going to maximize my benefits. And so there are all these Social Security calculators out there that you can tinker with. I think the Social Security Administration may even have one. But the idea is you start with your life expectancy, you determine the present mathematical value of various filing strategies. Option 1, file as early as you can. Option 2, wait till full retirement age. Option 3, wait until 70. Option 4, maybe something in between. There are other scenarios you can run that incorporate spousal decisions, which are important. And the idea is you want to run these side by side and compare different scenarios to make an informed decision about when and how to file. That's really the best way to wrap your head around what the best decision is, because this does have long-term value. This is a quick screenshot of some of the tools we have in our practice to evaluate this. And again, what you're trying to do is calculate the present value of a couple different strategies. There are a lot of ways to graphically represent that, but it's a data point you should have in mind before you run down and file for benefits. So, top 5 claiming strategies. There are a lot of ways to file for benefits, a lot of things to think about. What's the right time? There are a lot of strategies out there that I'm fond of. There are also a lot that are really common. And the 5 that we're going to cover today are a few that we've affectionately named in the practice because they come up a lot and they tend to really help people. They're not the only 5. There are a lot of ways to do this. And each of these are really dependent on the circumstances of the people that we're talking to. So really your personal and family circumstances. So strategy number one is what we call the stiff arm. And, I've talked about the math on what's the benefit of delaying until full retirement age. That's the stiff arm, is delay as long as possible, because in the most basic case, every year that you delay is a guaranteed 8% increase in your monthly check. $2,000 of primary insurance amount turns into $2,480. It's an excellent strategy and is probably the most common thing that we recommend for people who, where it fits with the rest of their financial stuff. Strategy number two is what I like to call the tandem. Remember that when you're married, this is something we've not covered today, but spousal benefits are very important, because if you have two spouses in a family, one has earned more than the other and has a larger primary insurance amount, the lower earning spouse has a choice when it comes for them to file surrounding whether they want to claim benefits based on their own earnings record or their spousal benefit, which is 50% of whatever the higher earning spouse is getting. So in this case, if you have a higher earning spouse who's also substantially older than the lower earning spouse, chances are they're going to die first. And when you have a married couple and one predeceases the other, you have a spousal benefit, but you also have a survivor's benefit. And so when one spouse in a couple predeceases the other, the surviving spouse has the choice of collecting whatever benefit they were or whatever is based on their own earnings record, or 100% of whatever the other spouse was receiving. And so the tandem is that if you have one spouse who's like 10 or 15 years older than the other one and they're higher earning, the tandem is where the lower earning spouse files as soon as they possibly can, because 50% of their spouse's check is going to be greater than 100% of their own. And so they might as well start collecting checks now if they're going to later collect a spousal benefit anyway. And on top of that, if the older, higher earning spouse predeceases the other anyway, then they're locking in a larger benefit, not just for the higher earning spouse's life, but for their combined lives. Because when the older spouse passes away, the younger spouse has the choice to continue collecting the checks that the older one was. I know I probably did a poor job explaining that. It's a little bit confusing, but the idea is this is an important decision. It's important to incorporate spousal decisions. It's important to view this as a household, is a better way to put it. Strategy number three is the ex-spouse. This is also known tongue-in-cheek as the spite claim. So if you were married previously and have not remarried, you can file for benefits based on your ex-spouse's earnings record. You have to have been married for at least 10 years, and the divorce has to be more than 2 years ago if you don't want to wait for them to file first. So here's the scenario. If you're married for more than 10 years and it's time for you to file, if you just got divorced last year, you have to wait for your ex-spouse to file before you can. If the divorce was more than 2 years ago, you don't have to wait for them to file first. You can file based on their earnings record whenever you want. Between 62 and 70. So this is convenient for a lot of people. And for some couples or some people out there who've been married multiple times for just a little bit more than 10 years, they have a lot of other people who are claiming Social Security based on their historical earnings, which is, again, an interesting nuance of the system. Strategy number 4 is the oops. I mentioned that there was a loophole if you make a mistake in your filing decisions. That loophole is that if you decide to file, let's say at age 62, and then a couple months later, you see our invitation for our Social Security workshop, and you come and we talk about it, and you realize, hey, I really should have waited until full retirement age. You can reverse that filing decision in the first year after collecting benefits. To do so, you have to cut a check for 100% of everything you receive. So if you file early and later decide that you really should have delayed, then you can give the money back and wait to file later and continue to accrue benefits or work toward your primary insurance amount by waiting closer to full retirement age. So this does open the possibility of delayed retirement credits too. It's not just full retirement age. You can wait all the way until 70, and it is a really convenient way for people to reverse mistakes. Strategy number 5 is what we call the busy bob. The idea here is if you have less than 35 years of work history, remember we talked about the need for 10 years of work history to be eligible for benefits. But if you only have 10 years, your primary insurance amount is going to be based on an average that includes 25 years of zeros. So a really powerful way to bump up your benefit dramatically, if this is you, is just to work even part-time for a couple of years and replace those years of zeros with something positive. So if you have anything less than 35 years of benefit history, let's say that you're at 33 and you want to retire. Well, if your retirement plan includes some kind of part-time work, make sure that it's work where you're paying payroll taxes, because by replacing those 2 years of zeros that are really dragging down your average monthly earnings with anything positive other than zero, that's going to bump up your benefit by substantially quite a bit. So that's the way the math works. Anything less than 35 years of work history really does drag down your benefit. And that's an easy, well, not too easy. You do have to continue working when you might not want to, but it's a powerful way to bump up benefits. Now, some of the top mistakes I see in the practice. Number 1, not thinking about this within the context of your household, thinking about your own benefits without incorporating the spouses. I mentioned in passing survivors benefits, spousal benefits, ex-spouses benefits. There are a lot of different dynamics at play there. And really the best way to coordinate your decisions with your spouse's decisions is to look at it in the context of your financial plan. How much income do you need? How much is going to come from investments? How much do you want to pull from other areas? What are our life expectancies? There's a lot to consider here in this decision. And like everything, again, I go back to like everything financial, it depends on your circumstances. There's a way to optimize the mathematical value of your benefits, but that might not be the right choice for you because the psychology and what you're most comfortable with is obviously an important factor too. So it just takes some coordination, it takes some discussion, and just run all the options, evaluate the pros and cons of all of them, and then make an informed decision is really the best way to do it. I see a lot of people not look at their benefit statements for a long time, like 20 years. And then they finally take a look at them when it's time to think about Social Security, filing for Social Security, and they say, hey, I earned a lot more than that back in 1999. Why is that not showing up? The Social Security Administration does make mistakes from time to time. So you don't need to look at this every month. Definitely don't need to look at it every month. But I do suggest that you glance at it when it's produced every year. And at the minimum, take a look at it every 2 or 3 years and just check it against your tax returns. Because they do have a process, they do make mistakes, they do have a process for correcting them. And it's a heck of a lot easier to correct mistakes from a year or two ago than it is 25 years ago. So just take a look at it periodically and make sure that you're earning credit for what you've paid into the system and what you're otherwise entitled to. And again, the way to do that, ssa.gov. I'll walk you through some screenshots here shortly, but it's easy to log in and grab those statements. Mistake number 3, earning too much after filing before full retirement age. So full retirement age, that's what the Social Security Administration, that's how long the Social Security Administration wants us to work, all things considered. So if you file at 62, start collecting checks, you say, hey, you know, I could earn an extra $500 a month by filing now, that's great. But if you have earned income beyond just a little bit of money, and you're collecting checks before your full retirement age, the Social Security office is going to haircut the amount that they're sending you each month. They store that away and then they give it back to you once you receive or once you hit full retirement age. So if you do plan to file before full retirement age, take that into consideration because it's not hard to bypass those thresholds. They are pretty low. A lot of people default to just claiming as early as they possibly can. Not always the best decision. I think I've harped on that probably enough. And a lot of other people default to filing at full retirement age no matter what without considering the options. There's a lot of stuff that you can do by delaying until after full retirement age and collecting these credits. Yes, it bumps your benefit, but by depressing your income between when you actually retire and age 70, that gives you an opportunity for pretty substantial Roth conversions in a lot of circumstances. Topic for another day, but it's a really powerful strategy I'm a huge fan of. Now, we're coming up on toward the end of the hour. I buzzed through a lot of this pretty quickly. I hope that's all right with everybody, but I did want to reserve a minute or two to talk about the status of the Social Security Trust. So we pay payroll taxes into the Social Security Trust every year when you're working a job that's eligible for Social Security, 6.2% up to the wage base. Everybody in the country pays the same payroll taxes if you're in a Social Security eligible job. So from the trust's perspective, they have money coming in through payroll taxes. They have money going out in terms of the checks that they have to write to people who are receiving benefits. We have more money going out of the trust each year than we have going in. And every year, the trustees of the trust are required to hire a bunch of actuaries and report on the financial outlook of the trust. How are we doing? How long is it going to be before we run out of money? What are the options for fixing this? And for years and years, the reports expected that the Social Security Trust would run out of money in about 2034. And they're looking at population demographics, life expectancies of beneficiaries, demographics of younger people and wages, how many people are going to be paying into the system in 15 or 20 years, how much might they be contributing to the system in 15 or 20 years, and how are all these dynamics going to work out with regard to how much money is in the trust. And so the concern for a lot of people in the country was with the pandemic, we had a lot of unemployment. We had a lot of layoffs. Payrolls went through the floor. So with less money going through the payroll system being contributed to the Social Security Trust, but all the same expected liabilities going out, the fear was that we would run out of money in the trust a lot sooner than 2034. So the trustees report actually just came out recently, like a week or two ago. And what they found is that I flubbed my timing here. When I said 2034, what I meant was that prior to the pandemic, we had enough in the Social Security Trust to pay benefits through 2034. And the fear was that with less money coming into the system through payroll taxes, that money would be depleted a lot sooner. The report that just came out suggests that we will have enough money to fund benefits, 100% of benefits through 2033. So rather than depleting the funds in the trust substantially earlier, that end date has only been backed up by a year. And what's more than that is after that happens, let's say we don't make any changes to the system whatsoever, we deplete the reserves, we hit $0 in the account in 2033, at the end of 2033. If you're claiming benefits at that time, it's not like your checks are just going to stop, because we still have a lot of money going into the system. We just don't have reserves to offset the difference between how much is going in and how much is going out. So the money expected to be contributed to the system at that time will be enough to fund 76 of the expected retirement benefits payable by the trust. So for people out there who are really concerned that Social Security is going to blow up and go away entirely, that the benefits that you've paid into and are entitled to every year are going to go to zero, I think there is basically zero chance. I mean, unless we have like nuclear warfare that just blows up the earth, or aliens come invade us or something like that, I don't think that is going to happen. But something has to change in the system, because if it doesn't, we will see a substantial haircut in the benefits that we're entitled to. There are some obvious mathematical fixes here. You can reduce benefits. You can bump up the retirement age. You can increase payroll taxes. There are a lot of ways to do this. This is a really unpopular thing for politicians to touch. We have a system where you have to get reelected every other year in the Senate, and every, 6 years in the House. And politicians don't like to bring this up. But we're coming to a point where we're going to have to make some kind of change soon. And my sincere hope is that it happens sooner than later, because as we approach this depletion date, the changes are going to have to be a lot more dramatic. They don't have to be dramatic the earlier. They don't have to be as dramatic the earlier that we make some of these changes. And really, from my perspective, I think it needs to be a combination of probably bumping up payroll taxes, bumping up the wage base, increasing retirement age. And personally, the one that I would start with is just raise the wage base and tax people on more of their income, as opposed to raising the amount of payroll taxes you're pulling out in the first place. So let's wrap everything up. Jim added a question here. I'm going to circle back to that here in a minute. So we talked about a lot of stuff today. It's important to be able to answer a few questions, I think, that relate to your own retirement plan before you sign on the dotted line and file for your own benefits. Specifically, obviously, you need to know what your primary insurance amount is. You should know what your filing strategy is. How is your strategy being integrated with your spouse's benefits if you're married? What are the tax ramifications of my filing decisions? And how will my benefits impact my retirement income plan? Don't blindly just go in there and file for benefits, please. I mean, if you're 70 and you're still not sure, don't wait any farther than 70. There's no benefit to that. You're just leaving money on the table. So don't wait any longer than 70. But if you're not sure, you're just thinking about, I'll just file when I retire or at full retirement age, put some thought into this, because doing this strategically is really valuable. If you're not sure how any of this fits into your plans, if you're not able to answer any of these questions with confidence, then it's probably a good idea to talk to somebody about it. If you have a financial planner, an attorney, an accountant who's familiar with this stuff, that would be a good place to start. As a thank you for being on today, I'm going to offer some Social Security strategy sessions. If you're interested, you have questions about any of this, you're not sure how it relates to your own situation, the idea is we schedule a 30-minute one-on-one video conference. You upload your Social Security statements to our firm's secure document vault, and I'll explain that in just a minute. We run it through our software, share a couple different scenarios, and then we get on a Zoom call for 30 minutes and just talk about your situation and how your benefits align with the rest of your finances. So there is business development benefit from my perspective. You know, if you want to talk about what we do as a firm, how we help people, what the fee structure is, all that, you know, we can go over that. But really, this is a low pressure way to, you know, just get some feedback on what you're thinking and what your filing decisions might look like within the context of everything else you have going on. So this is a sample report from our software. Again, we just run a couple different scenarios and I share my perspective on them. The way that you obtain your Social Security statement is you go to ssa.gov. The homepage used to look like this a few months ago. I don't expect it's changed. But on the left-hand side here, a little way down, you see My Social Security. So you click that, it brings you to a page like this, and you can create an account if you don't have one already. You log in, you can download your statement. It looks just like this. And my team, when we schedule a 30-minute call to review this together, we'll get you set up with our firm's secure document vault. We don't want to email anything like this back and forth with sensitive information on it, and show you how to upload this document that we'll use to run our reports. So pretty self-explanatory for a lot of it, but we're happy to walk through the tech side and how to set it up for anyone who has questions. So the way to do this is to add your name, email address, and phone number to a form that I'm going to type into the chat box because I know this is a lot to recreate. Confirm that's right. So I just pasted this link in the chat box. If you'd like to sign up for a Social Security session, click this link, add your information to the form, and my team will reach out later today to schedule a time with you. Pretty simple, and then we'll talk about logistics at that time. So thanks everyone for hanging on. We were a few minutes past the hour, but I did want to cram in the status of the Social Security Trust. I know I omitted a couple questions as they came in, so let's circle back to those. Again, if you have other questions, please add them to the Q&A or the chat, and I will field them as they come in. But we do have kind of a backlog here. So let's see. Bridget added a question. Oh, she just said disregard the question. Okay. So Jim had a question here a few minutes ago. Let's say you're single and decide to defaulting to file for Social Security at max age 70 for the extra credits, and then you get killed sometime between full retirement age and heart attack. You're left with getting nothing from Social Security, correct? Answer is yes. That's the risk. If you delay to file until age 70 and you die before you collect your first check from Social Security, then you will have died without benefiting at all from your earnings history. That is the risk. And that's why we go back to life expectancy of if you think you're going to live, and really the mathematical break even here is age 83. If you're going to live past age 83, it makes sense to file at 70. If you're going to kick over in your 70s, you file as early as possible. And I mean, you get hit by a car or have a heart attack or something like that, you know, there's no way to see a lot of that stuff coming. Okay, so Ricky, great to see you, Ricky. Thanks for being on. He's got some positive things to say, very much appreciated. Ricky asked, if I'm taking Social Security at 70 and have the max benefit, do I need the rest of my retirement portfolio to be able to hedge inflation, or is Social Security enough of an inflation hedge? Are there certain asset classes that would be better hedges against inflation or better complement the way Social Security calculates it? That's a great question. So let's say you wait till 70, you file for benefits. Now you're getting $3,000 a month. I'm just pulling that out of a hat. Every year thereafter, that 3,000 that you're entitled to is adjusted with a cost of living adjustment. And the Social Security Administration, I believe, has their own methodology for how they calculate those cost of living adjustments. But in general, it aligns pretty closely with the consumer price indice inflation measures. So the question is, should you adjust your retirement/investment portfolio knowing that Social Security is going to adjust for inflation? I would say probably not. I think doing so would be overkill. And for the vast majority of people, your retirement portfolio ought to have a healthy amount of equities in it, because most of us are going to need future growth from equities to be able to live off of that retirement portfolio for the rest of our lives. And if you don't have at least some equity growth, your chances of depleting the portfolio go up by a lot. So that being the case, stocks are a great hedge against inflation in the first place. And the reason for that is if you own an equity, really what you own is a small portion of a big giant corporation. And corporations are good hedges against inflation because, you know, you and I go to the grocery store and we see prices going up and up and up because of inflation. Corporations see that. Think of their income statement. They have revenues at the top, they have costs in the middle, and then they have profit at the bottom. If their costs are going up when they go to the grocery store, buy whatever it takes to produce their goods and services, most corporations can pass on price increases to their own customers, just like we're seeing, you know, across the supply chain right now. So I don't think you need to make any substantial adjustments to an investment or retirement portfolio, because you should probably have a nice chunk in stocks in the first place, and those are just innate hedges against. They're not perfect, but they're pretty strong hedges against inflation historically anyway. Patricia asks, after filing and you continue working, does Social Security add on the extra amount you have worked into your 80s? So I think what you're asking, Patricia, is if you file for benefits, let's say you file at full retirement age, call it 67, and then you work into your 70s and potentially 80s, does the Social Security Administration adjust your paycheck upward for those extra years of work you're contributing to the system? No, they do not. And that's a downside of filing before you're done working, is all those extra earnings. I'm pretty confident in saying you're going to pay into the Social Security system through the 6.2% payroll tax, but you're not getting the benefit of that because you've already filed. When you file, you're locking in your benefit. The only adjustment to that is going to be the cost of living adjustments that I mentioned a minute ago. Great questions. Social Security is confusing. All the nuances of the spousal options, what happens when, there's a lot to it. I mean, I'm proficient in this, you know, it's part of my job, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in all the stuff that has to do with Social Security, because it's like the tax code. It's deep and it's complex. The other thing I'll add is some people will go to the Social Security office and ask for help filing for benefits. Great thing to do. Don't trust the advice of the people working there. They don't have any idea about the context of the rest of your financial stuff. They know a lot about the logistics and the operations of their job and what they do. They don't know about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. I had a client a couple of years ago who wasn't going to retire for a couple of years. She had a reason to go to the Social Security office. I think it was because she had like a government pension, needed to ask them a couple questions about how they work together. So she went in, didn't know any better, and the rep there said, "Hey, you're 63. Do you want to start collecting checks now?" She said, "Hey, yeah, that'd be great," but she's still working full time, and so she filed for benefits. This is before I knew her personally, and then all of a sudden, the amount that the rep said she was going to get was cut by like 60%. That's because she was still working full time. And there was no discussion of that in her conversation with the person at the Social Security office. And that's not a comment on the people there. It's just the system doesn't lend itself to providing helpful advice from people working in those offices. So make your financial decisions before walking in there. The Social Security offices are very helpful in helping you file the paperwork, get it to the right place, that kind of stuff. All right, well, I don't see anything else coming in. So why don't we call it for the day? Thanks everybody for joining us. I enjoy doing these. Look out for future invitations. And if are specific topics or subjects that you'd like to hear about in the future, we're totally open to that. We want to do these presentations on topics of interest. And like I mentioned at the beginning, Social Security is one that's relevant to almost everybody. It's something that we give, that we present on, a couple times a year. And I see a lot of familiar faces. So that tells me that we either confused you sufficiently or it's still somewhat valuable. But if you're tired of hearing about Social Security, let me know. If there are other areas you'd like to hear about, we're happy to develop new workshops on other topics too. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.